Hello everybody, this is Bob Campbell from onOne Software's UK office, and I'm going to be talking to you this morning about masking a specific kind of image shot against a green screen background. So hopefully what we'll end up with is what you see in the middle of the screen. And to get to this point, we'll do some masking using a couple of tools that I don't normally use very much in Perfect Mask, and we'll start the process by opening a series of images, well in fact two images, inside of Perfect Layers. Then we'll move from Perfect Mask into Perfect Effects, and we'll finish with a quick look at Perfect Black and White. So this 30-minute webinar should give you a good handle on a specific kind of workflow inside of Perfect Photo Suite 7. Okay, so we'll start with a little background shot that I took in a French chateau or castle called Amboise on the Loire River last year on holiday. So I'm just going to open the image. It's the interior of the central tower in the castle. I think they could ride carriages and drive carriages up this thing with horses and stuff, so it's a pretty impressive interior. And what we're going to do with that is to put a picture of a young lady called Victoria on top of the image. So what we'll do is, when I double click on the picture, it says an image is already open. Do you want to add? Just say add, and it creates a layered image. If you look at the little layers palette on the right hand side, we have a picture of Victoria against the green screen background, and we have Amboise Tower as a layer underneath. Now, green screen photography is quite a neat way of enabling the photographer or the person producing a comp of several images sandwiched together to be able to remove a background simply. But you'll notice this screen is a cloth material. A friend of mine, Chris, actually took the shot. He's a professional photographer in near Birmingham in the UK, Chris Bradbury. I'd almost forgotten his name, would you believe? And he shot this picture with a cloth green screen background, so there's lots of creases in it. And also he ran the cloth underneath the model. Now that causes a little bit of a problem, and I'm sure you can see it. There's a lot of green reflected in the metal steel gauntlets and the sword that the girl is holding. So we need to remove that colour if we want this picture to look realistic. And of course we need to take out the background. So to do that, I'll go into Perfect Mask. Now Perfect Mask is the subject of quite a few recorded demos and webinars over time, and I've done some myself that you can see on YouTube. But I haven't used the particular tool that we're going to be using predominantly with this kind of image. And what I'm going to do is to take what Perfect Mask has given me, which is a quick assessment of the image where it breaks the picture up into segments. I can actually show you that segmentation process. If I go down to the bottom left-hand corner of the screen and click on Segments, then suddenly the image changes into something that looks like a kid's painting by numbers. I should be careful what I say. Maybe lots of adults use painting by numbers as well, but I know I used to use painting by numbers with oil paints as a kid. Now the good thing about it is that the background has become a single colour. The bad thing about it is that the definition of the segmentation isn't great. Now I can adjust that using different segmentation levels in the adjustment controls at the top of the workspace in Perfect Mask, but I'm not going to bother with that this time because I want to show you a basic standard masking process. So I'm going to go back to my all layers view so we can see the image in all its glory. And now I'm going to use the drop brush, the second brush down in the tool palette, and just wipe it across that green background. Remember, it's all effectively a single color now as far as Perfect Mask is concerned, and the background is chopped out of the image. Now what we have left is a lot of green edge, a lot of reflection in the gauntlets and the sword, and we need to be able to remove that. We also need to be able to remove that big green chunk underneath the girl's armpit. And the edge, fringing, I refer to this green sort of halo around the image as fringing. I'm going to take out with a refine brush. It's the third brush down in the tool palette. It's a fine brush, a refine brush, okay? It's nice and fine, it's small, it's dinky, and it's the kind of brush Leonardo da Vinci would have used when he was painting the Sistine Chapel to get all the details right. Of course, Leonardo da Vinci didn't paint the Sistine Chapel. I'm just testing you. It was Vincent van Gogh. No, it wasn't. It was Michelangelo. Okay, so we're removing background. Let's just take it away. All around the image, all around this picture, there is a little line of green pixels. And those green pixels will show up when we take this picture back into any other application. And I just want to remove them from here. There's a little bit of green around her eye there. Underneath her armpit, I'll just whiz around here. This brush is lovely. I could make it bigger to remove more information, but I'm not too worried about that for now. I'm just going to take away the rest of the fringing around the bottom of the girl's coat. Okay, now that's the fringing done with, I think. Let's just check. It's always good when you're doing masking processes like this just to zoom in. Yep, the hair's looking good. I like the detail in there. There's a tiny, tiny little bit of fringing still inside some parts of the hair. So just a quick run over again with this refine brush. We'll just take away any little bits that you don't need. I think that's looking okay. Now we need to start to focus on the bigger problem, the reflective green inside the that's contaminating the gauntlets and the sword. Just hit the little fit button underneath the navigator window, and that puts the image back to normal size. Now, to remove this reflective stuff, I've got a really neat little tool. It's one that I've always referred to as the color splashy thingy, because I can never remember the name because I'm incredibly old. Okay, its real name is the color spill brush tool, and this brush is designed to remove color contamination from an image. Now, when you click on it, you'll notice you suddenly get a couple of extra pieces of information in the top of the tool palette, the controls basically for the brush, and it says Smart Strength and Override Color. Now, let's just use the color splashy thingy as it comes. I'll just increase the size of it and see what it does to the image. Look, it's taking away the green, but it's not doing a particularly good job. It's leaving a kind of hazy residue, if you like, underneath the area where the brush has gone to work. So I'm just going to return and undo a couple of times those strokes so that they come back into play. Now, what we need to do to remove that very fine kind of essence of green that's left on the metal is to click on this little box called Override Color. It gives you a little color picker. Click on the color picker and select a color that we want to replace the green with. Okay, so I'm going to go for a mid-tone in the steel part of the gauntlet. Okay, now click back on the color picker and it gives you the brush. So you need a couple of clicks. We're going to do this a few times, so you should be able to pick up the process. I'm just going to run over the gauntlet, and now look at that. We're removing the colour quite accurately. It's not leaving any residue. I'm just going to do a quick shift click on the brush to give myself a straight line along that far edge, that top edge. There it goes. That's nicely done. Nicely done, Bob. That's great. And now I'll go down to the bottom glove. I think the colour is pretty much the same. So I'll wipe away the green on the gauntlet at the bottom. Now I'm using a mouse to do this. By the way, I'm using a MacBook Pro as well. I tend to like to use Macs. Done it for years, so why change the habits of a lifetime? And I'm pretty happy with the way the gauntlet is removing all of the green and just giving me back my colour for the sword, the gauntlets, and the steel part of the gauntlet. Okay, I'm just going to reduce the brush because there's a tiny little bit of green. Is that the hilt of the sword? I should know this, shouldn't I? Being a Brit and knowing all about ancient history. Let's remove those little bits and get that stuff out of the way. Right, now the brass bits of the gauntlets, the top of the gauntlets, I'm going to pick another colour. So go back to the little colour picker icon next to override colour. Click on the gauntlet itself, and this time I'll go for a lightish, shadowy area. See the colour change in the little colour picker box. Go back and click on the colour picker. So you pick a colour, and then you click on the colour picker, and it becomes a brush again, and just wipe in the colour, or wipe out the green anyway. Wipe in, beautiful, that's okay. I could see a little bit of green on that edge, but that's not too bad. The orangey sort of colour of the bottom of the gauntlet is probably a little bit too intense, but I reckon I'll get away with it if you don't tell anyone. Okay, so this is a really neat process and a really fine tool. It's a refined tool in its own right, and this will remove reflective colour, colour absorbed by, for instance, a beer bottle, a beer glass. There's a theme developing here. Anything else that holds beer that's transparent, and also wine glasses and plastic bottles and anything else besides. So I'm just going to do a little bit more refining on the edge by that little glove there, the little gauntlet, just to remove a tiny little bit of green there. I'm actually reasonably happy with the way that looks. And if I'm happy with the way that looks, then I'm going to apply it back into my perfect layers. Okay. Now, just for the sake of argument, I'm using Perfect Photo Suite 7 Premium Edition in standalone mode. I'm not running through Photoshop or Lightroom or anything else. So when I apply the mask back into my perfect layers, I go back into perfect layers. So I go back into the standalone suite. So we're moving from layers into mask. We're now going to be moving from layers into perfect effects. Okay, now just take a look at the layers palette. We've got still the tiny little thumbnail of the girl with the green background, but because we've removed it, we've got a layer mask. I didn't ask that layer mask to appear, it just appeared on its own. It's great not having to think about these kinds of things. The software is always working in the background to help me get the most out of an image. Now with that top layer selected, I'm going to dive into Perfect Effects. And in Perfect Effects, I can apply effects now just to the picture of the girl, just to the outline of the girl, if you like. We haven't got the background selected. That's a separate layer. So with this image selected, I'm going to nip down here. But Perfect Effects is fantastic because it's got 401 different presets for you to apply to images. I'm going to go to Sharpening, and I'm going to go to something called Texture Booster. I've already designated this as a favorite because the flag is solid white flag, okay? I'm going to click on Texture Booster. It appears in the top layer of the effects stack, and with my effect options open, I'm just going to increase the brightness slightly, and you'll notice suddenly I see an awful lot more detail in that image. I can see detail in the girl's coat that wasn't or didn't look like it was in the original shot. The information must have been there, but it was buried under quite a lot of shadow. So fantastic effect now of this kind of worn pocket in the edge of the girl's coat, so it looks really nice. And then I'm going to increase the clarity slider to really pull out the detail and the contrast in those gauntlets. The highlight of this image for me is the metal. It's the steel work, whatever it is, the steel sword, the steel gauntlets, the brass bits on the gauntlets. It just looks fantastic. Even the buttons on the girl's coat look really nice as well. Everything is shining brightly. How does this compare to the original image? Well, go back to the original image. Just go down to the bottom left-hand corner of the workspace, click on the large capital letter A in that little box, and it splits the image in two. Now, what we can see is that we've made a significant adjustment to the original shot of the girl. In the original shot, the metalwork looks very soft. Now it looks very contrasty. It looks much more interesting from my point of view. One thing I would be a little bit concerned about is the girl's face. She's lost a lot of colour, and her face is starting to look almost as textured as the steel work. So let's make a little adjustment to that. I'm going to switch off this mode by clicking through those little letters at the bottom of the workspace. So we get back to the original image. It's about 4 clicks. Never count them, just do it and it seems to happen. There's the girl's face. I need to be able to put back some of the softness in the face, and I'm going to do that in Perfect Effects using the masking brush. You get all your brush controls along the top of the screen, including this little beauty called Perfect Brush. And what that will do is to limit the brush strokes into the edge of the girl's face, so we won't affect anything else. Now, we have a cutout piece of image here. The girl is actually a mask, so it shouldn't be a problem. But I'm going to use the Perfect Brush just in case. I'm going to reduce the opacity of the brush strokes so that they aren't too fierce. And I'll increase the size of the brush a fraction. And we'll start to brush. And immediately you could see some of the colour return to Victoria's face. Looks great. Okay. Not too much, don't need to put it back to the softness that we had originally, but just put back a little bit of detail. That's beautiful. I love the selective possibilities inside of Perfect Effects, and indeed any of the programs from onOne software. Now, with that done, I'm going to apply the effect. It's just a single layered effect. We could put lots of different layers of effects into there, but don't overdo it. If you overcook the image, then it can start to look very unnatural. I'm on the limit, actually, of where I'd probably want to go with this picture. I don't want to make it look too strange and arty. So the software applies the effect. It's a texture booster, so it's providing textures into the image. Remember, I've adjusted the clarity and the brightness as well, so we've put quite a lot in there, so it takes a few seconds to cook. There's my image as it stands. Now I'm going to do something to the background, so just nip down the 3 layers and select the first layer entitled Amboise Tower. Okay, remember the French chateau. There it is. Now take that into Perfect Effects. And this time, if we apply an effect, it's not going to affect Victoria in the foreground. It's only going to adjust the background. So with that, all I'm going to do is a little soft focus. And if I click on this, you'll notice the background will become brighter. So don't look at me clicking, look at the background. As I click, the empty layer becomes white, soft, no darks. Okay, I can adjust the amount of that background adjustment. Now it's far too much. It's taking away detail in the stonework itself. Bring it back to around about 40. And now we have more contrast between the background and the foreground. The background's a little bit lighter, making the foreground inevitably slightly darker to the eye, and that's fine. That's okay. Now what we'll do is just say add to create a new empty layer, which means that I'm going to do something else to this picture as well. And what I'm going to do to it is a little bit of HDR, just to bring out the textures again in the stonework, but not make them overbearing. We don't want the background to start to dominate the foreground. I think we've got the balance almost right. Let's just say, well, let's try one, HDR look natural. Yeah, okay. That's actually brightened up the background and made the texture. Is it just too bright? Maybe. I'll use HDR look surreal. That'll darken the background a little bit. The textures and the HDR effect in the background are now a little bit overbearing. So take your little amount slider and just reduce the amount of that HDR. Just down to about 50%. Okay? Now, reapply that effect back into your perfect layers, or in your case it could be back into your Photoshop, back into your Photoshop elements, back into your Lightroom, or back into your Apple's Aperture, depending on which program you're using. It just takes a few seconds now to apply the effect. It's cooking in the background. It's got quite a lot of work to do to adjust that background, despite the fact it's a fairly subtle adjustment. I just want it to work as an overall image. And I think it will. Let's hope it does. Fingers crossed now. I'm sitting here with my fingers crossed and I'm going to have a slurp of my tea. Brilliant. Comes back into perfect layers. I'm really happy with that. What I'm going to do now is to merge a few of these layers together. If I'm pretty sure I've done what I wanted to do and I'm happy with the image, I won't keep layers sitting around. I don't think it's good to have lots of copies of the same file, especially if the file is quite big. So I'll just merge everything together. It's like flattening inside of Photoshop. Just helps you get the best out of your image. Now, let's have a quick dive into Perfect Black and White, because this image could look really good if it was converted into black and white. I think I'm pretty happy with the way it looks now, but let's go to Perfect Black and White. Single click on B&W, and there it has a conversion into black and white. It actually doesn't look that bad straight away. This is just the factory preset. The factory preset's fantastic in black and white. Now I've got the ability here to adjust all sorts of stuff. Tone, color response, the color filters that we would have used in the original shot if we were shooting on black and white film. Tone curves, glows, film grains, everything. Perfect Black and White is amazing. All I'm going to do with this is to go to Effects, 19th Century Processes, and find a nice 19th century effect. Palladium print. Let's try that. Palladium is amazing. You should read about Palladium on Google. It's fantastic. Just a single click applies the effect into... Whoa! I reckon that looks fantastic. Okay, the skin tone looks a little bit dark, but, you know, look at the detail now in the coat. I can even see little seams in the coat that I didn't think were there at all, even in the colour version. Palladium. It's so ancient as a process, and Palladium, I think, is the one that will outlast the paper that it's printed onto. So any of your fantastic 1850s prints in the Victoria and Albert Museum in London are going to last longer than the paper. I'd like to be around when the paper eventually evaporates in about 10 million years' time, just leaving the toner on the paper. Absolutely superb. Okay, I think that looks really good. I'm going to apply that now straight back into my perfect layers. So I've used this, I've done this process, by the way, without using Photoshop, without using Lightroom or Aperture. I'm delighted with the effects I get. I'll probably just take out a little bit of the effect on her face to make her a little bit lighter toned skin, but I'm actually quite happy with the way that is. Anyway, hope you've learned something today. We're going to be posting this webinar online, I believe, if it's acceptable, and I'll talk to you again soon. Cheers, everybody.